Grand Rising, Grand Arrival, Grand Return. Peace and blessings to the righteous and repentant alike. I am Sophia Spiritualite, and you're tuned into Don't Miss It podcast, where we go through long-form content discussing the news of the day so that it can be documented and archived in a manner that can be retrieved at any time. If you're trying to correlate dates, figure out what's going on, this is going to be a very, very deep dive look into the events occurring in the week. This podcast is going to come out in two parts. We're going to do Monday through Thursday in part one for each week. Then we'll do a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then on the third day of the week podcast episode, we're going to discuss some of the executive orders and go into a little bit of detail in what's going on with this administration, because all this information is really important. It says a lot, and there's very few people who can actually explain to you what much of this means. So I find that it's really important. So we're going to try to keep these episodes to about 45 minutes or so, so that they're short enough for people to digest. So let's get started. This is for January 20th of 2025, from the 20th to the 23rd. That's what we're going to discuss in this episode. This does cover the actual inauguration of President Trump. And so I think it's really important to break down some of the stuff that happened. So let's start with Monday, January the 20th, 2025. Now, this was also Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which it seemed a little unusual for it to be a holiday on the same day as the inauguration. And so we're thinking that really, honestly, inaugurations should be federal holidays. Like, every inauguration should be a federal holiday. And perhaps this is the reason why they picked this date for MLK Day, because it would always land on inauguration. However, there's people who work for like warehouses and stuff like that. They didn't get that day off. They don't recognize that holiday. So I think that's going to have to be changed, just like I think the days that we go to vote should also be federal holidays, so that everybody has a day off, and there you can just have that day to vote. I mean, I don't think we have days like that in this country where everything just shuts down, but I think that's something that we're going to have to implement moving forward in order to make this stuff work. So on the 20th, State Farm renews some of its policies in the Palisades in Los Angeles. So let me talk about that a little bit. The fires started in Los Angeles in around January the 6th or the 7th, right after Epiphany. And one of the things that happened is that State Farm had canceled a bunch of policies right before the inauguration. I mean, right before the fires. Right before the fires, State Farm in December canceled a lot of people's policies in the Palisades. Now, I'm recording this on, I should say that February the 27th. So we have a lot more information now about this. So I don't want to get too much into what we currently know now, because we'll talk about that more as it comes up. But just know that State Farm had just canceled a lot of people's policies in the Palisades. So on Inauguration Day, they reinstated quite a few of those policies. Okay. Also, Biden, he pardoned Fauci, Milley, J6 committee, and his family in his last days. I mean, literally the last minutes. One of the pardons didn't actually hit the news until the middle of the inauguration, the one that he did for his family. Now, why does Joe Biden need a pardon for his family? I understand that many people know about the crimes and stuff of Hunter Biden, but they don't understand that the whole Biden family has been profiting off of Joe Biden's name for the entirety of his career. Now, keep in mind about Joe Biden that his wife and daughters were killed by the wife was drunk, and for years Joe Biden was going around telling people that his wife was killed by a drunk driver, but it was his wife who was drunk. And she got herself killed as a result of driving drunk with a car full of kids. Nobody is telling. And Jill Biden was the nanny. She was the babysitter. So this whole Joe Biden thing is really something. And, you know, I know people know a lot about that story, but there's a lot more to it, and maybe, you know, if it becomes necessary, we'll do a deep dive into Joe Biden, but I don't think it's necessary. He's gone off to the nursing home, probably where he should be, okay? Where his babysitter wife can take care of him, which is fine with me. But the whole pardoning of Milley's a general. That's weird. Fauci, I mean, these pardons were so enraging. People were just happy about the inauguration, but these pardons was really enraging for people who have been following these stories. And then as soon as, okay, and then let's talk about the inauguration a little bit. I did another video on my channel, my YouTube channel, where I went into some details about the actual inauguration and stuff like that. But let's talk about something. There's like a huge elephant in the room, right? Like, the inauguration was moved from indoors to outdoors, and that created quite a bit of concern that there was some sort of plan in action to prevent President Trump from taking the oath of office, which I am a firm believer in that. However, what we also saw was the elements giving Trump cover for what was just a reasonable response. What do I mean by that? It turned out to be so cold in DC, and the cold really came out of nowhere. It wasn't cold before like that. And the cold came out of nowhere, and it was like in the teens, which was pretty, like, it was just too cold to have an inauguration outdoors. And so President Trump did the correct thing and moved the inauguration indoors. It had been held indoors before. This wasn't, you know, something that never happened, nobody ever seen, anything like that. It's just that people were really expecting for him to go along with the tradition. And President Trump made a very positive statement where he said maybe the inauguration should be held inside from now on. And the way that the inauguration was held is that the actual swearing in was held inside, and then they had the little luncheon that was set up either at the White House or nearby, and then they went to the Capital One Arena for the parade. I believe that it was the safest way possible to keep everybody from getting too cold. Many people were not in DC when Obama got inaugurated, but I was in DC, right? And so the some of the crazy stories is that there were people in line inside of the 3rd Street Tunnel, which runs basically like underneath the National Mall. People, or underneath the Capitol really, but people were in line in that tunnel and never got into the actual inauguration. And they were in line for hours, 10 hours, like before and after, because once the program started, you got to think this is 2008. People weren't really streaming stuff on their phones. Nobody knew it was, and usually they put a blackout on devices, you know, due to threats and stuff like that. And so people were, and then the tunnel doesn't have good service anyway. So people were stranded in the tunnel for 10 plus hours, nowhere to sit because you couldn't bring anything with you, with flyers that had been passed out to all of these people saying that this was their ticket to the inauguration, where that's not how any of that works, you know. So it was really, really unfortunate how that happened. Now in 2016, I was also in DC when the inauguration happened, and I was actually driving Uber at the time, and I had heard about all the Antifa people going to show up and all of that. And so basically what ended up happening was I was dropping people off at the closest point where you could get dropped off, and there was Antifa standing at the gate ready to beat these people up, and many people got beat up on the way in, and many more people got beat up on the way out. It was like all hell broke loose when people were trying to leave the inauguration. And so I was excited, but at the same time I was watching in horror as people I knew I had dropped off earlier in the day could not even get out of the National Mall to go home. It was really horrific. And so what I would like to see is that it be held inaugurations. This inauguration is the standard for how inaugurations are held moving forward. You have the swearing in ceremony inside. You have the parade at the convention center, which is right down the street. It's literally in walking distance. Everybody can get in. People can have seats. It's really comfortable for the people who want to watch. It's really comfortable for the people who want to watch, and it doesn't have these little weird side effects that certain things have when you try to do it differently. And so I really I hope that this is the standard for inaugurations moving forward, that they're inside. Plus it prevents this whole, open air drones, any kind of attack that could potentially happen is basically can be planned for as far as OPSEC is concerned, which I think in the day and age of drones, drone technology, space technology, whatever these people are working on, OPSEC should be one of the most important things that we look at, okay? So we ain't gonna worry about that right now. All right. So also on the 20th, Trump already had a lot of executive orders and actions in plan, directives. One of the main directives that was put in on this day was one that relates to the senior executive service, and we'll discuss that on one of the on the executive order podcast day. But this executive order action regarding the senior executive service was so critical because it was the senior executive service who prevented Trump from really taking all of the actions that he wanted to take in his first term. The senior executive service was a group of unelected bureaucrats who basically, for lack of a better term, they're the ones who ran everything. This was a non-governmental group of people, and this was established in the 70s with Carter during his outrageous administration by his sister, basically. And essentially, it was grown to about 10,000 persons on the payroll for the senior executive service. And so what did the senior executive service do? What they would do is they took their orders from somewhere else. Now, where the somewhere else is your guess is as good as mine, but it was some outside influence outside of the executive office. They took their orders from there. And so basically when a president would come in, they would say, okay, go and do this. And the people who were in the senior executive service, which Obama grew to 10,000 people, would basically ignore them and do their own thing and sabotage and go right back to how everything was being done. And the president could never really get things done the way that he wanted to. And so that's exactly what this executive order does. It limits their power. Actually, it took away their power entirely. It limited their power, and in conjunction with all of the DEI things that have been implemented, it actually made it so that when a president comes in, he is able to do what he wants to do. And he doesn't have this group of unelected bureaucrats, because it's not just the bureaucrats who are like the GS1s up to GS12s. Those ones are bad enough. They're bad enough. It's really these managers, because what the senior executive service does is it actually moves managers from place to place. They don't even know what they're managing, and then basically they get the orders from somewhere else on what to do. It's pretty it's pretty horrible the way that system was set up, and to date, no one has discussed the senior executive service. These major podcasts are not talking about it. We're going to probably do several deep dives into the senior executive service. I've been studying this since 2016. It's really, really horrible what these people do. And so that was one of his main executive actions on the 20th. All right, so let's go on to the 21st. January the 21st, 2025. This was Tuesday. So India's government announced that they were prepared to repatriate 18,000 people that are in the U.S. illegally. This is crazy because India, all these countries, they know who is in America illegally. They're fully aware of who is here illegally. They literally are. There's no way of getting around it. And so if India knows they've got 18,000 people here illegally, that means everyone knows that they've got people here illegally, which means they are deliberately engaged in subterfuge or whatever you call it. These countries, these different countries, they know exactly what's going on. That's the point. That's the point I want to make. All right. Trump to attack countries taxing U.S. nationals overseas. Now, this is a big deal because and the actual executive order for this comes a few weeks later, which we'll talk about. But if you try to do business overseas, any business, I mean, even if you're just trying to do a digital business, you can sell products into the UK or okay. I'm sorry. Sell products into the UK or all right, my apologies. You're trying to sell products into the UK. You're trying to sell services into the UK. They have VAT taxes, which is really never been treated like a tariff prior to President Trump doing that. But it is basically a tariff, and it's on different stuff, and you really don't know how much it is, what it's going to be, so on and so forth. Even if you want to convert, now mind you, I trade Forex. So converting dollars to pounds is super easy on Forex. They don't give you any hassles. But imagine like you're trying to take money from someone who's in the UK. They make it extremely difficult to do business. And we all know about the different executives and whatnot that they've arrested. Not just Julian Assange, but they had that crypto guy in jail, the Russian one, for no reason. They lured him over there. They tried to do the same thing with Elon. It's pretty awful the way the UK operates, especially to our tech people, because like they charged them billions and billions of dollars for violating their rules that they made up, where the company is an American company based in America, out of America, where we have freedom of speech. In Europe, they don't have freedom of speech. And so they have been finding our tech companies like Zuckerberg, like the Amazons, the Googles, all these people. They've been finding them billions of dollars and basically supporting their economies as usual off the backs of Americans. All of Europe has been doing this, and so Trump is going to put an end to that. These companies, this stuff that's been going on, has been very, very predatory to the United States, and it's coming to an end. I made a video about the crowning of Americans, which you can check out on my YouTube channel. The Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Jackson Brown, or Brown Jackson, whatever. She wears cowrie shells to inauguration. So she's a Supreme Court justice, a so-called black woman, so-called black woman. She is wearing this whole African spirituality cowrie shells, right? Which is fine. But that was rejected at the ballot box because that's the same kind of thing that Kamala was trying to do with her whatever campaign, is bringing this African spirituality. And so that was rejected. The people did not vote for that. So the fact that she's still in defiance is wearing these cowrie shells, and cowrie shells is money. People use that as money. So you're literally saying, I am a prostitute for the courts. Like, I'm not really sure why you would want to make that particular why would you want to make that statement at the inauguration? I don't know. But announcing that you're still for sale as a black woman in a room where there's not too many black people is a little bit crazy. But to each his own. All right. FEMA extends housing in Western North Carolina until Memorial Day, which is great. Snow hits Louisiana and the Panhandle and a Florida Panhandle, and we even were out of school one of these days because as a Floridian, the roads are not designed to handle any kind of ice. And so if there's ice, they literally do have to shut things down because the roads are not designed to handle that. It's not just, and go and put down some salt. No, like in Jacksonville, there are hundreds of bridges. One of the bridges is tall enough for a cruise ship to fit under it without having to open. So these are ginormous bridges. Some of these, they're not designed for any kind of ice, and so that's what you see. Ross Ulbricht is granted a full pardon by Trump. This is really important because a lot of the I call them libertarians, but the libertarians, they actually voted for Trump as a result of these promises and concessions that he made to the Libertarian Party. And so he promised that he was going to pardon Ross Ulbricht. And so these people were like, he's not going to do it. Watch, he's forgotten this and that. And then it's like, no, the pardon came out and Ross was released almost immediately. So what's the story with Ross Ulbricht? He actually developed a website called the Silk Road where people could sell stuff on, like an eBay, right? But people were using it to sell stuff like quote unquote drugs, quote unquote marijuana, or whatever. They were using it in a way that the federal government didn't like. So they railroaded him in a court process and ended up giving him 50 years in jail plus like 2 life sentences, something outrageous, for creating a website saying that he was personally responsible for everything that happens on the website, which we know when people get how many people, if you're older like me, you remember people used to live stream murders, straight up murders on Facebook, and they didn't go and put Zuckerberg in jail for 50 years plus 2 licenses. They didn't. And so it was Ross they had a problem with because he was not a part of their system, and he wasn't cooperating with them by giving them a back door, because of course everyone knows they have back doors into all the social medias, into Facebook, Twitter, all of this stuff. They have back doors into them. That's another video for another day. But so yeah, they have back doors into them, and therefore they can spy on whoever they want to spy on. That's really what that's about. And some more things we'll talk about a few weeks into the administration. All right, Oracle, OpenAI, and SoftBank pledged $500 billion for AI. They don't have $500 billion. Should be of no surprise to anybody. We're not even going to talk about that. I think it was interesting that they got Larry Ellison out there because a lot of people aren't familiar with him, but because he was like so excited to take some sort of a lead role on this, it got him out there. Also, that Sam Altman is a fraud, and not just because Elon doesn't like him. I did some looking into his bio. He's a completely fraudulent person, and so just like SBF, these are not people that you would trust with anything. And people at this time, on this day, people didn't understand that when people say they're going to make a $500 billion investment, that does not mean the United States is going to put up $500 billion. That means that these individuals are going to bring $500 billion to the economy. And at this time, like, watching everybody on X and stuff like that, people don't understand how anything works. And we'll for sure have to talk about this at some point, but people don't understand how this stuff works. And so when they heard the $500 billion, they're like, oh, the government's going to give them $500 billion. That's not what was said. Now, again, we're 3 weeks into administration. People are starting to figure out what this stuff means. But this first day, people didn't understand what it meant. They thought that it meant that we were going to give them $500 billion, but that's literally not what was said at all. Okay. Trump pardons some DC police officers, so they will release the J6 prisoners. Apparently, some DC police officers were convicted for trying to capture an illegal alien who had committed a crime, and they literally convicted them. And so because one of the executive actions Trump did on the 20th was to release the J6 prisoners. Well, especially in DC, they don't want to release them. It's like, if you're wondering why, for example, this is still a little relevant, Hamas was slow rolling the removal or the release of hostages, is because we found out that some of them were dead. And that's basically what this J6 thing is. They're slow rolling the release because they actually treated these people in inhumane ways. And so they don't want to release them because they've treated them inhumanely. And that's not something that's supposed to be. So I'm hoping that we get total prison reform, complete and total prison reform in this country at the federal level and at the state level, because the state prisons are even worse than the federal prisons. These people are not being fed well. They're not being properly taken care of. They're basically being treated like slaves. And I don't think slavery is legal, ethical for sure in this country, even if it says that you can have slaves as long as they committed a crime. Well, you're making up crimes and you're not even holding everybody to the same standard. So there needs to be some sort of especially for non-violent offenders and people who have been in jail for more than it's 50 years is the maximum for a jubilee. There's supposed to be a jubilee every 50 years, like at the longest. It's every 7 years at the shortest and every 50 years at the longest. Nobody should be in jail for more than 50 years. After 50 years, they need to release them. Period. After 7 years, if you haven't committed a crime where you took someone else's life, a capital crime, people should be released. There's no way there should be people in jail 20 and 30 years for smoking. Like, I mean, if you're dealing drugs, that's even that, you're supposed to have a chance to rehabilitate yourself, and you can't rehabilitate yourself if you're in jail. So I'm hoping for complete and total prison reform during this administration. That's the very least that the humans who are in the prisons deserve. Now, if you're an illegal in the prison, you should just be sent back to your country. But the humans, Americans in the prisons, deserve an opportunity for rehabilitation, which we have not seen. The First Step Act was a good step, but there's still a lot of horrible things going on. Okay. All right, there's a push to scare blacks about birthright citizenship. So basically, Trump announces in one of his executive actions that he's going to, remove illegal aliens, which he promised on the campaign trail. And so now they're trying to say, oh, black people, watch out because you're going to be somehow sent out of here. And it's like, no, that's crazy. I am an American. I will say that there's been a lot of people who have been pushing for people to denounce their citizenship, which I find to be reckless and stupid. And so I hope that those people who were pushing for people to denounce their citizenship are removed to whatever country they're from, because that's not something Americans should be giving up. I am a citizen based on the Civil Rights Act of 1866, the Indian Act. There's a bunch of acts that make me a citizen. Am I a U.S. citizen per the 14th Amendment? No, because those are corporations. But I am a citizen national, and the term national and citizen is used interchangeably. A national citizen is a person, a human. A U.S. citizen is a citizen of the corporate estate of the United States government, the U.S. government. And so, no, I'm not that kind of citizen, but I am a national citizen. And so I do hope some of these people get punished for this fear that they were pushing. They're going to get punished, okay? Chris Brown files a $500 million lawsuit against Discovery ID because of this whatever movie they made on him that was totally fraudulent. And one thing I will say about Chris Brown is really Trey Songz is the monster they say Chris Brown is. And I think it's really unfair what they've done to Chris Brown. And I really hope that this whole thing with him gets rectified, because it is my belief, as Chris Brown being a black person native to the land, I believe that he was not the aggressor in that situation with Rihanna. And because she was a woman and she went on Oprah show and cried, and basically Chris Brown went on Steve Harvey's show and Steve Harvey chastised him, that's what made this thing what it was. And so it's really, and nobody knows exactly what happened either. It is really not fair that Rihanna was the only one who was, she's a victim, but nobody looked at Chris Brown potentially being the victim, which again, I'm going to say he probably was, because our men are not aggressive. Black men are not aggressive unless they're being aggressed, and then they become aggressive. But if he wouldn't be aggressive towards her if he weren't being aggressed. So anyway, that's another thing. All right. Trump blocks all CDC, NIH, and FDA external communications. Basically, the CDC, NIH, and FDA was getting ready to announce a pandemic based on the bird flu, and he said, no, y'all are not allowed to communicate outside of me, because all of the power is vested of the bureaucracy is vested in the president. The president is the one who has to, the buck stops with him, and so he has to know what all these people are doing. And so this is just another way of stopping all of that crap that they basically were trying to do. USA City in Japan congratulates Trump and U.S. on election. So that was a really cool little video I saw. All right, Wednesday, January the 22nd, 2025. All right. Elon calls out Ellison, Altman, and SoftBank on not having the $500 billion. I said that yesterday. They didn't have it. They don't have it. They didn't have it. They don't have it. Okay. Trump has an EO executive order rescinding affirmative action and DEI for contracts in universities. I make the statement that security clearances should be temporary. What happens, and why you need what this whole DEI thing about, especially as it relates to security clearances. If you work for the federal government, you have to get a security clearance. Once you get that security clearance, other companies like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, other, companies will hire you, because the cost of obtaining a security clearance is very high. It's a very high cost. And so basically, in order to deal with that, what companies will do is they will poach off the federal government. So let's say you have a contract with the federal government for a year, basically. You'll do that year in the federal government, and then you'll go to Lockheed Martin, and you'll probably get paid more, but that's because they didn't have to foot the cost of the security clearance. So I think that the federal government should not allow security clearances to be transferred, and that all of these companies should pay for their security clearances. Period. Point blank in the story. It's not fair that the American citizens are footing the bill for security clearances. There's no other way there's no reason for that. These companies are multi-billion-dollar companies. Let them pay for their own security clearances. That will make the playing field more even, because I don't have a security clearance. like that. And so because I don't have a security clearance, I can't even apply for the job. They want you to already have a security clearance, but they won't even hire you if you don't have a security clearance, which means you have to go through the federal government, through the bureaucracy, learn their rules and all this stuff in order to get a job with these other major companies. And that is not fair. So I hope that they just put an end to that entirely. Nobody should have a security clearance unless the companies need to pay for them themselves. Security clearances should not be transferable. You have it while you work for the government. When you leave the government, you don't have it anymore. Maybe they can pay a fee to reinstate it, but it's not fair that these Fortune 500 companies are getting these security clearances on the backs of the American taxpayer. It's not fair. All right. Trump team expects to raise $5 million by the summer from corporations and wealthy donors, which is great. Some Western North Carolina folks are moved to furnished apartments, which is fantastic. The USCIS, which is immigration, waives COVID-19 jab mandate for applicants, which is good. Boosie is on X asking Trump for a pardon, which I hope he does get. There's a Nashville shooter this day, and he's a Hebrew Israelite child of 17 years old. Let's talk about that for a few minutes. This is going to be long. We got one day left. Listen, the Hebrew Israelite community needs to be cleaned out. It needs to be fumigated. These particular individuals, of whom I know many of them very, very well, because I was a follower of this community to figure out what was going on and what they knew that I didn't know. A lot of these people are fomenting fear. They're fomenting hate. They're fomenting aggression, because the God that they serve is a vengeful God. Now, everybody don't serve the same God, and we'll talk about that here and there. That's more for my spiritual channel. But they don't serve the same God, and the God that they serve is a very angry, very bitter, very jealous, very vengeful God. And so if you're teaching this stuff to children, that's not good. Like, humans are human. And that is not something you could say in front of a Hebrew Israelite. They will tell you that humans, based on their skin color, are not the same kind of humans. And I don't agree with that. Once you come into this realm, you are a human. Now, were you a human before you came into this realm? I don't think that even matters. How about you handle what you got to do in this realm? And so the Hebrew Israelite community, they really need to be called out for their aggression. But I am hoping that they just get defunded, because I'm pretty sure USAID money was funding a lot of these Hebrew Israelite camps and communities. And once their money starts to dry up, hopefully they will just go away. All right. Also on this day, the DOJ freezes all civil rights cases, which is fantastic. A lot of those were not legitimate cases. All right. So January the 23rd, 2025. This is the 48th anniversary of the Roots premiere, which is a whole video I don't even know if I talked about it, but let's just say, for the sake of posterity, that the guy who created Roots, he actually was a very wicked person who stole the story from someone else and basically lied about his genealogy. He lied about the story, and he sold our people into slavery by telling them at this time, this is 48 years ago, that they were slaves. Before this, that was not a discussion. People did not think that they were slaves. And I do believe that this was due to a transference of a deity or an entity from some work that he had done with Malcolm X. And there's a particular entity that works within the Muslim community which needs to be eradicated too, but we're not going to go into too much detail about that here. All right. Trump also signed an executive order for the Lumbee Indians, helping them to get federal status, which is great. This is a campaign promise that he had from 2020. he promised them that he was going to get them this status, help them get this status. It's been very insane what they've done to the Lumbee Indians. If you don't know who the Lumbee Indians are, they are black Indians. They are black. I know some Lumbee Indians. I know people who lived in Lumbee, North Carolina. I've been through Lumbee a bajillion times because you have to go through Lumbee on the way up and down 95. And so these are black people. These are black Indians. And they literally gave them the status and then took it away. It's been really horrific how those people have been treated. And that area of Lumbee, North Carolina is quite poor. It's very, very it's very rural and it's poor, and these people they need this kind of stuff. So it's just about recognizing the black Indians that we have in this country, and not only the $5 ones and the ones that co-opted legitimate tribes with the $5 ones, because a lot of that happened too. All right, Mexican citizen illegal scams a casino out of $700,000 pretending to be a tribal leader in Michigan. This story is so crazy. He was a Mexican, but he was pretending to be a tribal leader, and so he scammed a casino out of $700,000. Insane. Okay. There's a beach and tennis club in Cali that uses goats to clear dry brush and to escape fire damage, and this story goes viral, which is very, very interesting. The introduction of these animals, especially goats, back into our natural habitat is going to be, I think, pretty crucial moving forward. So this is just January 20th through January 23rd of 2025. This is our Don't Miss It podcast. We're going to have the next podcast is going to cover Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Hopefully it won't be so long. I hope this has been interesting and informational to you. Please go to the website, linked in the description, to support us or consider subscribing to our channel here. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next video.